I know you can hear me. And I know that so very few start watching this early. But be aware, I am about to begin tonight's sculpt, so be right back. Right back. All I'm really doing is going through and making sure I've let people know that I'm in the middle of this. Yes. Bing, 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 bing. As you may or may not be able to tell from the title of today's broadcast, it's going to be a grumpy ranger. Yep. Blink. Bleedy. Okay. Now. Boo. And welcome to my sculpting. Yes. Let me put this. I just don't need this yet. I'll need it in a few. Okay, so welcome to my sculpting. As you may or may not know, depending on if you've been here before, I sculpt 3D models to be intended to be printed out as tabletop miniatures. Now, just as an example here, step number 1. Where's a good one that I haven't painted yet? Alright, step number 1. Orc. Unpainted, printed orc. With hacker and shield. The thing is, when you paint them, oh, that come on, zoom. Zoomy zoom, zoom, zoomy zoom, zoom, zoomy zoomy zoom. Yes. Let's turn right light, yeah. And when you paint them, they end up looking like almost any other miniature you get from anywhere. Yay! Like this guy with his Grossmesser sword, complete with the part of the guard that goes over the back of the hand, and his bronze Celtic enchanted offhand sword. That just so happens to be wearing the same garb I wore when I was doing the LARPing. Yeah. Well, what can you say to that, you know? But what I'm doing is I am sculpting minis. I spent the past couple weeks making basically an entire horde of orcs. So I'm going back to making player character type models starting this week. And I'm going to be inspired by characters that I and my friends have played in various games over the past relatively recent years, so that I can, you know, try to cover what's currently a standard, current standard character types. And the Human Ranger has been a standard since Tolkien. So tonight's a Human Ranger with a bow. A grumpy one. You see, back in back when it was still called D&D Next instead of 5th edition, because it was still in beta, I made a Human Ranger named Wade Snarkmeister. Now, before I tell you his full story, I need to tell you about the time that a 3rd level ranger, third level, blew up almost the entire party. Yep. You see, we were in a swamp. Lots of swamp gas. And as such, the Game Master told us that fire-based spells, instant, whoomph. Electrical-based spells, 50-50 shot, whoomph. So try to avoid those two elements. You know, just the two most common elements for damaging spells there are. I didn't care, I was a ranger. But just in case, I had an idea and wrote a note to Game Master and prepared a special arrow. Now, at the end of the night's session, we found ourselves confronting a shaman of the lizard folk. And she was surrounded by, a whole bunch more lizard folk. And a relatively young black dragon. And our most powerful attack spells were all fire or lightning. So I decided it's time to use the special arrow. What was the special arrow, you might ask? And I will tell you that the special arrow, well, it was a steel arrowhead, standard, normal, typical. But I had taken my flint and steel and chipped off a small piece of flint and placed it on a bit of animal fat so that it was just barely touching the steel. This little animal fat is a bit of glue. Yeah, flint to be scraping against steel. And I rolled to shoot the shaman. And I rolled a natural 20. Crit hit the shaman for damage, and then detonated all of the swamp gas for a very wide area. So, yeah. Fortunately, that was enough to kill most of the lizard folk, and most of us survived. And now our spellcasters could use their most damaging fire and lightning-based spells against the one dragon type that's not resistant to half of them. But we were still all down like 3d6 damage. Except the bard, who was up on a hill for some reason and was out of the area of effect of the whoomph. As a friend of mine named Bob would call it, the big orange whooshy. If you know Bob, ask him about the big orange whooshy. If you already know, it was a big orange whooshy. So, anyway, that was Wade. He also was known for other explosive things, like the time he threw a keg full of brandy on a bad guy right before a sorcerer in the party used firebolt on said bad guy. So, got to the point that Wade was not allowed near anything explosive or flammable ever again. He's a ranger. What can I say? I know it's usually the wizard that's blowing the party up. But it was Wade Snarkmeister. Yay! And that's who we're going to be making a miniature for today. A slightly grumpy, bearded, bow-carrying human ranger just wants to get it all over with and get all snarky and sassy and shoot things. Yeah, except Sturges. Don't like Sturges. So the first thing we do, we go in to Dad's studio. Now, this is the program that I use to create basically what I would call my maquettes, my pre-sculpt geometry. In 3D Studio Max, I created a human geometry, and it's visible right down here. And then I brought it into this program and I rigged it, which means I assigned bones to it so it can bend and move and pose, and created all sorts of props like the bow, so that, he'll have base geometry for that. And then I load in props, load in parts, pose the figure, and I send it on to the next program where I do the actual sculpting. This is just raw, basic geometry. So the first thing that I do, Wade Snarkmeister, he wore a tunic. So I put this on the figure. When I blend everything together, that will become basically the bottom of a tunic with a belt around here, you know, that sort of thing. He also had, pardon me for the yawn, he also had a hip quiver. He had a longbow, which we're going to use the model for the self bow for his longbow. This will get detailed further. He wore a heavy backpack. Let's see, where did I put it? Backpack heavy. Which means I'm going to take this and I'm going to rotate it a bit more to get it out of the way. There we go. And I don't remember. I think he had a knife. I'm not sure. We're going to go ahead. Actually, let's go ahead and put the dagger on the hip. No, that's too much. Let's put a horn on the hip. There we go. And that is our basic props. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to give him a pose. So we start off by going up here and we expand from selected. Now you probably can't see the menus. I blame that on how the displays are handled nowadays, but what we did was we went up to this little spot here where it's got, you know, several lines and an arrow. I click on it and then I slide down to where it says expand and go to expand from selected, and the end result is that it's all expanded. I'm going to unexpand the tunic skirt because I don't need to worry about it right now. But what I need to do next is figure out a pose for old Grumpy here. I don't think he wore a helmet. And I know he did not wear a breastplate. So, well, he's got a bow. He's going to have a beard, probably a hood and mantle. And he's just got to be like, really? So, what we do first is posing basics. Imagine that there was a plane, you know, a flat plane for the hips, hip bone to hip bone. Imagine there was a similar one, shoulder to shoulder, for the shoulders. The shoulders and the hips should never be parallel to each other in any axis. And they all should never be parallel in any axis to the ground. The reason being is because if they were, they would look very stiff and awkward. Unless you are making a miniature of a U.S. Marine standing at attention, don't ever have them be parallel. You got to have them be slightly tilted towards each other. The other primary is for motion poses. Motion poses, you want to have off balance. The center of gravity being beyond the base formed by, you know, your 2 feet. That's your base. If your center of gravity is forward, you're going to fall. Or you're in the middle of motion. And we want that motion. We don't want stand here, lift a leg, lift your arms and, you know, lift your arms and you're running. No, you're standing on one foot with one leg lifted. So, the first thing that we do, we're going to go ahead, we're going to just kind of rotate a little bit. Side. Oh, snakies, whoops. The horn needs to be on the hip. Yeah. We're going to side to side a little bit. Just a little. And just a little bit of bend. I'm not going to twist it because that would be when you turn the miniature in your hand. Okay, now we're going to bring this in side to side. And bend the foot a little bit. And now we're going to go to the right view. And you'll notice that I may have bent him forward a bit too much. Let's go to left view. Yeah, that's way too much. Okay, left eye. We're going to bend him out. And we're going to bend the foot back. And we're going to the front view so that we can rotate that left foot and get it flat on the ground, or the base as the case may be. Okay, now we do and now I have a cat scratching at the door because I've been having problems with the cats being too jumpy when I do my shows. So I closed the door. I'm going to bend it forward a little. And twist it just a little. Now I'm going to go back to the front view so I can see the feet again. This time I'm going to bend the toes. And just to get it closer to the top and make it easier to, closer to the line, easier to read, I'm going to twist them. Okay, and then beep, 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 beep. Okay, and that is our feet and legs. Fortunately, that's not going to affect too much down there. Okay, now the abdomen and chest, we're going to both bend forward a little and side to side. Actually, let's move the abdomen back a little and the chest forward a little. Okay, now his shoulder is going to drop some. Go towards the back and twist a little. The arm itself is actually going to come out to the side and twist in the opposite direction, and his arm is going to bend and twist. Okay, now this shoulder, we're going to drop it a little also, and forward and twist. Just a little, just enough to get the impression that what we need. Now we're going to bring this arm forward, twist it, bend, twist, bend. It's like, are you telling me the truth? What you're saying, is that exactly what you are trying to do? As I bend his fingers just a little bit, and I'm going to twist them a little, because a twist will make it look like some fingers are bent more than others. I'm going to bend the neck back a bit and the head down a bit. I'm also going to side to side the head. Okay. Okay, here we have our archer. Actually, we need to bring his leg a bit further forward, because we're going to be weird. That stance ended up looking a bit more effeminate than I wanted him to. Front view, and let's select that foot, and we're going to bend it. And we're going to twist it side to side. We're going to hit Control D to drop it to the ground. There we go. Okay. And that looks like we've got our sculpt pose ready. Now, if you're in here with me, please respond. Please say something. Because I come in here all the time, I hit @ and all I see is my own name. It doesn't trigger Nightbot. It doesn't, give me any even hint that anyone is even beginning to watch. So okay, so anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all of the props and whatchamacallits. So we have just bare doofy. That'd be File, Export. Oh, a second. Nope. I gotta do another thing. It'd be just a minute. Meshes. Broadcast miniatures. Select them all. Oh, select them all. Cut. And paste into that one. Okay, so File, Export. Grump Ranger body. Accept. Now I make the Grump Ranger invisible and the tunic skirt, and only the tunic skirt, visible. Well, export. Grump Ranger skirt. Accept. And then I hide it and make all the props visible. File, Export, Grump Ranger props. Okay. Now I get some soda. Now, I've got all the props are ready. Well, I do need to go ahead and do that. And it's time for me to switch programs to ZBrush. Yay! And in here is where I do the actual sculpting. Among other things, first thing I do is I go ahead and in this program, I got to load in the body first. Yes, there we have it. And before I do anything else, I'm just going to go ahead and take care of something that needs to be taken care of on this particular variant of the sculpt. And that is, I need to smooth out the chest a bit, and I need to smooth out that wrinkle that came from bending in. And I need to increase the intensity. Increase the intensity! Okay. And then around the back, I have at least one other bit of smoothness I need to worry about. And then it's also right up in here. And there we go. You see, articulation is never perfect. Never. Let's go to stroke. And I'm going to lazy mouse and turn that off and reduce the strength a lot. I'm going to kind of push this area out and then smooth it together. Okay, frame. Okay, that's our basic geometry, you know, that's our dude. And before we do anything else, I need to add in the rest of his stuff. So we're going to append, apply mesh 3D. That is going to be his skirt. Okay. Yeah, I know I'm calling it a skirt. It's really the bottom half of this tunic. But anyway, that's what they had back then. And this is going to be his props. Now, one thing you'll notice looking at it, the sculpt in this program, is that he's relatively low poly. You can see those polygons. You know, it's got a higher density on the face and the torso, but then you come down to like the legs and the arms, and it's pretty low. So, what we do before we do anything else, we go to the skirt, which is even worse. Go to geometry, and we subdivide it one time. Then we take Mr. Grumpy himself and we merge down so that it's one model and hide the props. Because the first thing we do before we do anything with the props is we have to make his clothing. So now the next thing is we got to divide it a couple times until where it says active points is around 1,000,000. Yeah, 1.6 will do. Delete lower. Now we go to Dynamesh. Set resolution to 768 and set blur to 0. And I click Dynamesh. Now what that does, that takes all of the geometry, and it's easier to see under Botox, and it fuses it into one. Now if I hit smooth, it would blend. Now I need to increase the intensity a lot for this. It would blend that tunic bottom in, and hey look, I got a the bottom of a tunic. Now, and frame. Everything from here on out is time for this. My Wacom tablet. Yes, Wacom. With little instructions on how to access the storage area in here. Yes, this has the storage area instead of the tablet stylus base. Even though I made my own, you know, in brightest day and blackest night, no bad art shall escape my sight. But those who worship DeviantArt's might, etc., 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 etc. Yes, I'm up to 4 people. Oh, hello. Who all's in here? Anyone I know? Anyone awake? You know, that sort of thing. Anyway, I guess I'll just go ahead and go back into sculpting. Now what I need to do next is I need to make his mantle. His mantle will be a hood, which means the next thing I need to do before I even do the mantle is I need to erase his ears. Yes, I must erase the ears, because they will be completely covered by the mantle and by what hair he will have. And that's gone. And now here, and erase the ears. Get to the chopper! It's an ear chopper! It chops off your ears! Now you noticed me shrinking it just then. The reason I shrank the mouse is because the smaller the mouse, the fewer polygons under it, the faster it smooths things. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off down here. I'm going to pull up a bit. Oh, yeah, it would help if I put on the full focal shift. I'm going to pull up a bit, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then I'm just going to follow where I think that the edge of a hood would be. Okay. Some of you may have heard of the concept of the cape versus the cowl. Well, this is definitely a cowl because he doesn't wear a cape. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now we're going to make the mantle part. That's the face part for what sticks out of it. Effectively, what's going to happen is I'm going to draw on this whole shebang with the masking tool, because when I'm done, one thing you can do in ZBrush, everything that I mask off can then be extracted out as a new shape, a new tool, a new set of geometry. What it does is it duplicates the geometry, but then it extrudes it out. It makes it it creates a duplicate inward and outward, and that duplicate is a solid piece of geometry. And as such, that duplicate will then be able to be sculpted. It will follow mostly the lines and spaces and geometry of the body, So it's a great thing for using to make clothes, making the basics for clothes. This one will take a bit more sculpting than usual, simply because it's also got that hood. I gotta make sure that the hood ends up looking halfway decent. So, here is our hood. I now go up to Subtool, and I use Extract. I set it to 0.03, and Extract. And then Accept. Now, you'll notice that it's got a little thin white line around everything. That's not because it has a white line, but because it has a gray line around everything else. So I hit the masking button and I draw, and that erases it. I do the same thing up here, because if I didn't, then it would still be present. Now, the next thing I do is I go to Geometry and I Dynamesh it at 256, because right now it would, well, let me show you what it looks like now. You'll notice there's only one polygon width here. When I do the Dynamesh, well, 256, when I do the Dynamesh, it has multiple rows. So the next thing is move topological. And what we're going to do is we're going to make the mouse a lot bigger. We're going to make it sag out near the neck, because this is going to be our hood. And most hoods back then were not superhero cowls. They did not stick out quite that way. Yeah. And that should do the basics of the back and side. Now, the next thing to do is go ahead and shrink the mouse, and I'm going to smooth out. So I'm going to smooth out the inside. Right in here. The reason for that is because it'll help it. And then I'm gonna kind of pointillate, or make pointy. Pointillate is not the official term for make pointy, but I decided I wanted to use it. Tip. Frame. That's the hood. Now, it is time for the next one. The next one is the next piece of clothing. By the way, this helps us define the limits of the tunic as well. The next piece of clothing will actually be on the middle of the arms. The reason being is Wade wears a short sleeve tunic. Reason for the short sleeve tunic is also the reason why he wears a well, he's from a rather temperate area, a little kind of warm, so he has no need for a big old heavy long sleeved for the really warm, really cold natured tunic. I'm also trying to clean up areas where it's too big. See, one of the things is ZBrush paints in voxels. So that means that circle that I'm painting on isn't. That's just the cross-section of a sphere. It's equal to where I'm operating. So gotta fix where this was. Okay, and frame out. Excuse me. Sinuses. And now I extract the sleeves. Except deselect. Now to show you what I mean by it'll still be there. Look. It's still there. So I do that to erase it so I can come in here. Alright. And now I gotta Dynamesh it. Because it's cloth, I'm gonna just Dynamesh it as it is. And then kind of divide it. No, before I divide it, let's frame up. Now, we're going to use move topological to move in these sleeves into the arms. I'm going to kind of pull in and up a little. One thing about the ZBrush is that when you use it, wherever you last stroked, like right here, my last stroke was over there, that's now the center of pivoting. So, I need to make sure to get in. And I've got a cat that's crying at me, bully. Should have thought of that before you started giving me all those problems yesterday, or not yesterday, but Thursday on the stream. Yeah. I don't know if y'all can hear him or not, and I probably will never know because y'all aren't talking. I have no idea if I've even got anybody that's actually watching besides bots. So. Oh, Zombie Bite! Hello! So, how did you find this little brouhaha of a channel? Is it perchance from one of the discords from Photoshop, from not Photoshop, from Facebook, from the Reddit, any number of places that are giving me that I advertise in that give me nobody to come? Okay, and then we're gonna smooth out here. And that's the cuffs of his tunic. Ah, Amp Guard, yes. Hold on just a second. Yeah, there we go. So anyway, what I'm doing, like I said, I am sculpting a ranger. Next step is I need to make his belt. Which means I go back to here. And I need to zoom in to his belty area. And shrink the mouse. Because he's not going to have a big old belt. He's just going to have a regular belt. And I just draw on a line. Need to be able to see where it is here. And go here, and then here. Clothing-wise, he's going to be pretty simple. I mean, it's just, you know, tunic, a bracer on his left arm where the bow is, boots, some wrinkles to hint the fact that those are pants and not bare legs, and then the fun will begin with the beard. Oh, that'll be fun, I say. Oh, I just noticed I missed a small bit over here. Anyway, so I extract this, accept it, deselect, deselect, and then go back to hit, geometry, Dynamesh at 256 because I want a little bit sharper edges around it, and then divide it a couple times because I want it higher resolution since I'm going to be extracting the belt buckle from it. So now I draw on effectively a square region that will be his belt buckle. Yeah, and now I go back. I'm going to extract it 0.02, accept, deselect, deselect, frame. Now, the thing is, because of how it extrudes out, it's now rounded. So I'm going to have to use what's called the slash brush. This will do when I make sure to turn off Lazy Mouse, Z add, and reduce it quite a bit while I try and stop my hiccups. I can go over this top corner and sharpen it, and then do the same thing down here. Sharpen, and then just hit it very lightly with the smooth, just to make it less of a wrinkle and more of an edge. And we have a nice square belt buckle. Now we go back up to Big Boss, and the next thing is we're going to draw on his archery bracer, which is going to be mostly on the inside of his forearm. Let's go ahead and hide those so I can do this properly. And I'm going to erase part of it there, there, and then I'm going to shrink the mouse too, and I'm going to draw on straps from the back of the arm. And this one goes around here, and this one goes around here. And I'm going to extract those out at 0.2. Not quite as thick as usual, because these are steel plates. No, not with steel plates. It's because it wouldn't work right. It would be so thick, it would be too much. So now we have our archery bracer. Once again, we're going to Dynamesh it and then divide it a couple times. Delete lower. Okay, now the next step is boots. It's called ZBrush. Yes, it is. Now here's the question for you. For his boots, should they be cuffed boots? Loose boots? What kind of boots should I make for this guy? You know, the piratey style cuff boots, like what I made on this guy. You know, he's got the piratey boots, or just the straight tube boots, like most people have, or like modern combat boots. Meanwhile, my brain is not in the best of shape right now. I'm like, bleh, brain fry. Okay, well, I guess I'll just go ahead and give him regular boots. Now the way I'm going to do that is simple. I'm going to grab there. Oh yeah, I forgot, I got to have the right subtool selected. Yeah. And there. And now I'm going to extract at 0.03. Extract, accept, draw that little line, and draw that little line. Now, the reason why everything is sticking so far out is because when it comes time to actually print and or, you know, otherwise deal with the geometry, yeah, it that's what ends up happening is it doesn't have enough room to print. Go back to selecting those, frame on them, zoom out, and we gotta make these resolution of 256 Dynamesh. Now Dynamesh takes it and it reorganizes it, completely re-adds the polygons in such a way that they're evenly distributed and roughly the same size. I mean, let me show you an example. I'm going to turn on here. Now you can see as I zoom in, the polygons in the front are pretty much regular, but on the yellow part here, they're almost totally linear going in and out. When I Dynamesh it, it evens out those polygons. Now, it also does other things that we'll get to later that have to do and make things easier with making miniatures that are printable, I should note. And then we're going to make the mouse a bit bigger, and we're going back to move topological. And what's going to happen is we're going to go ahead and bring this in and down. Derp. 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 We got to do this with all the sides of the boots, because this is the part of the boot where it's actually going, you know, around the ankle, and it usually fits tight around the ankle. Now the thing is, it's not going to stay this shape, because right now it's a little thick around the ankle and around the lower, the foot, top of the foot. But what we're going to do is we're now going to smooth it. Well, let's increase the smoothing amount. And what smoothing technically does is it averages out the geometry with the geometry around it. So all else being equal, it would tend to become a sphere. All else is not equal here, thankfully. So we don't have to worry about it becoming a sphere. Let's go ahead and just do something similar to here. See if we can do it this way. Let's increase the strength to 100%. Yeah. Going really fast, a bit too fast in fact, so let's shrink the intensity back down. And then what we're going to do, now that we're smoothing this out and flattening it out, we're going to go back and I released the shift key and I now have regular. I'm going to drag it down. And pull it back in, drag it down and in. And then make sure I smooth out the thing. I frame out, and he's got his boots. Now, the next thing is wrinkles. Before we can do wrinkles, we have to make the sleeves part of it. We have to hide anything that is not going to be actually part of the tunic or the boots or him. Grab this and move it up until it's there. Now before we're going to have to basically do the same thing we did before to blend this in, and that's we're going to be dynameshing, but before we do, we need to go to the head and we need to sharpen the eyes with the slash and subtract and make it smaller. And the reason being is because, as you can see, the space around the eyes got turned into a kind of a blended area, and we need to sharpen that and make these eyes a lot sharper, so that when it comes time to print, it'll be easier to find and see. Yeah. Now we frame out. And now we're going to merge down twice. We break open the geometry tab once again, and without changing the blur, which is still at 0 and the resolution at 768, we hit Dynamesh again. And now we have a slightly bigger. Right? Hit shift, let's bring this up to 100, and I can blend these in, and we now have our sleeves that are part of the shirt and the figure. We don't need a collar for this, a neckline for this, because the entire neck area is covered by the mantle from his hood. That's one thing that's a little bit easier to deal with on this particular figure. And now we make sure that it's all done. Let me move up here and smooth in here. Yeah. And that's that. The sleeves are done. Well, the basic sleeves. And now we do the same thing down here on the boots, where they meet the foot. Not where they meet the thigh, only where they meet the foot. We want to keep that somewhat sharp angle, or calf rather. Keep that sharp angle where they meet the calf. In fact, we're probably going to go ahead and add a little bit more in this area for some wrinkly bits, but that is our new figure. Now the thing is, we need to do a couple things about first things first, I need to increase the smoothing on the chest area, because tunics are not spandex. We need the impression that those muscles and those forms are there. We don't need them to actually be present. And the same thing goes back here. Now, we're going to bring on the belt, but only so that we can see where it is for the purpose of making wrinkles. You see, there's a couple different kinds of wrinkle, and there's three that I really worry about. One is what I'm about to demonstrate, and it's called compression wrinkles. Basically wrinkles because you've got a certain amount of cloth, you got a belt that's cinching it, so you're getting wrinkles coming out from where it's being pinched together. And so we're adding those. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. The wrinkles end up being a lot bigger than they are in reality. Because, again, it's the same reason why the proportions are different than they are in reality. Because when you go to paint them, it becomes harder to paint if they're too small. Now, it also becomes harder to print on an FDM printer, like a proccess 3 or a CR10, or even some of the higher end, fancier ones like the crazy Kodak thing. Now, below the belt, it also has compression wrinkles, but they rapidly fade. So as I make these, I'm drawing down and blending the bottom of them. Okay. This is to represent loose wrinkles. This will be another kind of wrinkle that we're going to get to soon. That also affects the upper torso. But before that, we now are going into our slash. We're going to Z sub, and we're going to draw in lines up these wrinkles. And now smooth out top edges. Smooth out the bottom of this one, because it's wherever they are away from what's causing them. Wrinkles always have a cause, whether it's, in this case, compression, gravity, you know. Well, there's a reason why in sculpting it's called drapery, the act of sculpting cloth. Now, one thing to remember about 3D printing and creating your own cloth, wrinkles rarely, that's too strong, wrinkles rarely bend curved, and usually only when there's multiple interacting wrinkles. They tend to stay straight as long as they can. They also do follow gravity, so anyway, like I said, get a slight yeah. Okay, and now we do the ones in the front. Yay, a little bit here and a lot of it here. And Alt lets us do what we just did over again and do it twice. Or, no, wait, Alt lets us do the inverse, that's right. So, Shift lets us do the smoothing. Now, the next thing is using the same basic styles for this. We have a wrinkle set coming up because of a bend in the fabric, because of the bend in the arms, and these tend to array out like the rays of a sun from where the bend is. You can see all of these types of wrinkles on your own shirt if you glance down, like right at your arm where you got it poking out, where your sleeve is bent, you know, things like that. Now, it's a relatively loose shirt. We then go to our slash once again, and this time we draw on the bottom, say, third of the wrinkle. This gives it some gravity, and it also makes it sharper. And the thing is, yes, clothing is very sharp folds, but a little bit under. Clothing has some very sharp folds, but this is also a cheat to be able to catch paint from the paintbrush when it comes time to paint the figure. So it's kind of multiple purpose here, and it makes it sharp, makes it more noticeable than it was. So now I draw here, here, and here. I briefly touch it with the smooth brush, and I underscore it here, here, and here, and once again barely touch it with the smooth brush. And I draw here and here, and then Alt here and here. I then touch it with the smooth brush, and that's the upper torso wrinkles complete. Well, on the tunic, you can see it's already looking more like clothing rather than just some kind of form-fitting tube thingy. So I can do a laced boot sticker MC. It will be more difficult to sculpt on. I can just go ahead and sculpt it. Okay. So now the next thing to do is, I did not finish these. Fortunately, I am still on the slash brush. And slash down. Now we go back to our standard, and here, and make it a little bit bigger, we're going to do just basic draping wrinkles. They're going to start at the tension wrinkles, but then they're going to come up deeper come down further. And then I'm going to switch to slash. And once again, we're going to start here. We're going to go down the bottom third of the wrinkle and maybe give a little bit of a bit there. Add some smoothing. Okay, and I'm going to smooth right here. Okay. That's going to do is let's go ahead and okay, now we go down, moving down. Okay, now when I frame out, that's a pretty baggy tunic. We gotta smooth out that right there. And this tunic is wrinkly. Yay! That's cloth wrinkles. Wrinkles that come from compression, wrinkles that come from hanging, and wrinkles that come from being in an area that bends. Now, you asked for lace-up boots. We're going to have laces, but it's not going to be, you know, the full-on. You know, going to polish this in the front leg. The boot sections kind of weren't fully as high a resolution, so we're seeing ghost images of the fallen polygons. You're seeing the ghost of the fallen polygons. Yes, I remember the day that they invented polygons. The ghosts of the fallen polygons. That's bad. Quite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the inflate tool. Shrink it down. Now, these won't necessarily be that visible on a printer like mine. On a resin printer, they'll be quite visible. But make sure that I don't have lace mouse on. Good, I do not. I'm going to increase to 13. And I'm going to draw on one. Oh. I'm going to draw on and hit 1 to reinflate. 2, hit 1, 3, hit 1. What that did is that gave us the laces. We're going to go over how to make them look like they're actually laces in a minute, but 1, beep, 2, beep, 3, burp. Now we're going to slash, going to sub, shrinking it a little bit and making it really deep. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw around the edge of the laces. This will help define that they are in fact laces. And again, this is something that may not be seen on an FDM printer. It will on a resin printer, but even if it's not seen, it helps define a volume, create a shape that the eye doesn't necessarily pick up on it, but the shape acts the way it should, as if the details were in fact there. Now that we've done that, we're going to draw in the gap between the laces. Yeah. And again, it's something that, looking at it at this scale, it looks like I overdid it. But when it actually comes time to print, you'll see that I didn't. Okay, now movies. I still have to draw okay, and frame. Now, while I've got him here and nothing else in the way, it's time to make his beard. Okay, so we're going to make the mustache separate from the rest of the beard. And what we're going to do is we're going to do exactly the same thing we did for clothing. We're going to mask off. And then we're going to unmask parts of it. The corners of the mouth, for example. The bottom of the nose doesn't need it. And we're gonna go up into the filtrum the way most mustaches do. We are going to then extract it to 0.02. Extract, accept, draw that, and come back. Now we're going to dynamesh it at the default 128 and then divide it a couple times, make the mouse a bit bigger, and smooth out the area between the nose and at the ends. We'll get back to that. But for now, it vanishes. And we do the rest of the face. Okay. And then Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, that's where our beard is going to come from. So once again, we're going to extract it. Accept. Draw that. Select him. Draw it again. Now we're going to select the beard. Go to Geometry, Dynamesh. And divide it only once. What we're going to do is we're going to smooth out the outer edges. Okay. And you never want to know where my brain goes when I do this sort of thing. And just to make it visible. Ow. I'm going to go ahead and select the mustache. We're going to the move topological. And we're going to make it bigger. We're going to drag this up and over. And then down. Okay. Once again, we're going to open up to let the mouth breathe, so to speak. Okay. Now, need to make the beard just a wee bit larger in some areas, namely longer down here. And what we want is we want to try and bring it down so that it blends to the neck as much as possible to minimize the amount of supports that this beard is going to need. And by minimizing the beard supports, we minimize supports overall. Now, let's go ahead and bring it out. Yeah. And then just to make things all nice and proper, we check them up with the hood. And we see that we're going to need to bring this in up near the head. Okay, now we still need to bring out the side right here just a bit. And that is the basic geo for the beard. That is not the beard complete, because now we need to make it into actual beardy looking stuff. And I don't mean By bearded looking stuff, I do not mean the type of collie. Now, fortunately, you do not have to draw on every single lock of hair. Instead, you just have to draw on the basic hair locks. Okay. And by that I mean, you know, these shapes of how does hair clump. You know, how does it form into strands, and how does it follow together? And once you've got that, you can pull up any number of fanciness that you can do. But the primary thing to remember is the miniature serves a purpose. It represents somebody or something. And very often it's something that is going to get painted. So you've got to make it so that it can get painted. I've made miniatures before that didn't take paints as well as others simply because I kind of had things in the way. That's not going to be the case here, but instead what we do is we've got to make sure that we give a sharp edge to one or both sides of each of these locks. Because what that will do, that will let them hold the paint better when the brush goes over it. Usually hair and beards are painted with a dry brush technique, which means that a paint loaded with a brush loaded with paint is wiped off on a paper towel or something along those lines, and then it's dragged across an area that has the detail you want to capture on it. And the raised areas pick up that paint and drag it off of the brush. In this case, that would be the brown color, or whatever color hair you end up making the archer, you or whoever else paints that figure. So by giving it these hard edges, we're giving it a place for paint to stick. By making them long and slender, need to turn off the person, make them pretty much long and slender, we're giving them the shape of hair. Because hair doesn't necessarily stay as individual hairs that you have to draw 50 gazillion of. Instead, hair clumps together. And by doing that with the strands here, it makes it a lot easier for us to deal with it. And I'm hearing one of my cats complaining about being locked out again. And oh well, should have thought about that with how you've been behaving. Now we go to the mustache. Got to do something very similar with the mustache. So we go to geometry and we're going to subdivide it a couple times. Delete lower. And now what we do is we're going to go ahead and just draw on There we go. Now we're going to go to add, and we're going to once again we're going to add some slashes that are going to sharpen up the mustache parts. And since these are smaller strands, we're going to use just a single stroke per. Okay. And that's the beard. Now we can go ahead and turn on the props. And he's looking pretty good so far. Now I just need to grab, he's not so much grumpy, I know, but I need to grab those props, and I did subdivide them a couple times to make sure that they're of a similar. I also need to grab the hood and subdivide it. Okay, now the last thing we really need to do before we do anything else is the hand. And what we need to do is we need to get in here. Yeah. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'll be right back. This is getting ridiculous. There's a cat over there that would not stop crying. This one. No! Do not get in my lap. I got my tablet there. Go! Oh. Crazy furball. I'm trying to get into where the thumb is on this bow hand. And it's really hard to reach, but I've got to get in there because there's a gap that's clearly visible based on, you know, the fact that there's some horrible there. Let me just kind of smooth it just a little. Okay, now we're going to do the hands. One of the things that we've got to make sure that we're doing, we make sure that the brush is slightly, as close to the same size as the individual fingers as possible. Now, add on the knuckles and a quick stroke down for each of the tendons on the back of the hand and smooth those out. Those tendons aren't actually really visible on most people, but hey. Then we decide, okay, there'd be another knuckle here and another knuckle here based on the index finger. Based on the pinky, there'd be another knuckle here and another knuckle here. Now the middle finger is the longest, but the ring finger has them in the same spots as the index. And now that we've got those knuckles drawn on, we use the smooth tool and we flatten out the individual links of the fingers so that they stop looking like bent Vienna sausages and start looking like hands. And again, and then because this is a human and not an orc, we kind of briefly tap over each of the knuckles They've done their job. They don't need to be sticking out into deep space. That's already enough to make the hand look more like a hand. No! These cats, I swear. Now we're going over to the other hand. And we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to draw on the knuckles. No! 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 Go! Shoot! Oh, you do. This is why I had the door closed, cat. Any other time, sure, but you don't understand when I say no. Wait till after I put the tablet up. We draw on the tendons, and we smooth them out. Then we draw in our knuckles. Yeah, for those who didn't know, the ring finger is actually the same size as the middle. And then we just kind of drift over all of these since it's a straight line. Now, the next thing is we need to go up a couple sizes of brush and do something similar for the thumb. And then we need to add in the hand shape. Considering this hand is an open hand. Frame. Okay. Now the next thing is we zoom in. This is probably the next to last thing we got to do. And we're going to use the slash brush. Zoom it up to about, yeah, that's good. I'm going to zoom in. Shrink back down to the size of the finger and one size smaller, and then we're drawing in the division between the fingers to kind of reinforce that separation between the fingers for when it comes time to blend it all into one final surface. Now, okay, and now we go to this other hand, which already looks a lot better than it did when it first came in. And we just need to go lightly over it because it's got some gaps as it is. You know, I wish there was a hotline for if you see warning signs of someone on the internet who always has to tell a better story. Sometimes those people can get annoying. You say, yeah, I do 3D graphics work for a small little company called Daz 3D, and no, I don't do video games, I do other things. Now I'm going to draw in a little palm wrinkles, or finger wrinkles. These will again not be visible in an FDM printer, but they will be visible in a resin printer, and they will also help imply the right shape on an FDM. Alright, frame out. And I can finally put this up. Well, I could if I get it untangled from my headset. Yay! Untangled. Now, I zoom around. The next thing is I need to grab that horn and kind of drag it away from being blended in with the tunic. So I grab the horn, big, pull it out. This helps with one thing, and that's that no horns are the same. And so by doing this, you know, it's not an exact perfectly rational shape anymore, but oh well. Okay, now I frame out and I'm going to merge down every single thing. Now the last thing is we have one more thing to append. This last thing that we have to import now from our directories is the base. This base, first thing we do is we're going to divide it a couple times, lower, and we are going to go down to deformation, and they have offset. And we're going to slide it that way a little. We're going to offset it by Z forward. Then we're going to offset it by Y down. And that looks about right. Hit frame, and here we have our basic archer miniature. Now I go back up to subtool, I select the body, merge it down, and I have one grumpy archer. So the next thing to do is to dynamesh the whole thing together. Dynamesh sounds kind of like dynamite, doesn't it? Yeah. So I hit dynamesh. And it's done. And it's 1.353 million polygons. That's too many to get into most slicers on most people's printers. So what we're going to do is we're going to Z plugin. And Decimation Master, there's a number here that says 35K. If we press that button, what will happen is it will calculate what polygons can stay and what polygons can go, and how to change their shape and stretch them to fit the shape and keep the angles as close as possible. Now the end result is rather messy. I mean, right now if I zoom in really close onto, say, the face area, I hit that button, you can see that all of it's mostly squares, and pretty much, you know, there's occasional triangles, but it's mostly squares. I hit this button, and well, you'll see in a second. And here we go! Okay, now it's okay, baby boy. Okay? Now it's okay. What are you doing? What are you doing? Do you mind? Yes. No. No. Little buddy. Yes. And it's reordering the vertexes, and reading the file, and boom, 35,000 active points, 70,256 polys. But if we zoomed in on that head, and I turned on the lining, you can see now, yes, for the most part they're regular triangles, but some of them are really long, like right in here. Some of them are really small, areas where there's more bending. I hit frame, turn that off, and here we go. We have the geometry for our grumpy ranger. So I will now export this. Cast miniatures, new Grump Ranger figure. And there we have it. A basic, ordinary Ranger figure. It just happens to be completely and utterly sculpted in just under 2 hours. Thank you very much. Yes. So, what's going to happen now? I'm going to find a way to persuade Ralph here to come on down. Come on down, little buddy. Yeah, there you go, little buddy. And I'm going to go ahead and get ready to call it a night for terms of the broadcast. So what I am going to do now is I am going to hold my hand up over to the side. No, now that hand is I am going to, and I'm going to watch for this hand to hit 1. I'm going to count down. When I count down, I will be signing out. This is to try and deal with lag and make sure I don't log off too soon. So that would be 5, maybe 4, definitely 3, 2, 1. Good night.